Before New York became the empire you know, it was hell on earth. Imagine streets filled with raw sewage, bodies stacked in overcrowded rooms, children working themselves to death in factories they'd never escape. This wasn't the distant past. This was America. This was New York. Just 200 years ago, the greatest city in the world was a living nightmare, and most people who came here never made it out alive. This is the story of how millions suffered, fought, and died to build the skyline you see today. When people hear New York, they think power, Wall Street, the Statue of Liberty, Times Square. But there's another New York, one that's been buried beneath concrete and forgotten by history. A New York that smelled of death, that sounded like desperation, that felt like a trap closing in on everyone who entered. Using cutting-edge AI reconstruction technology, we are bringing that world back to life. We've scanned historical photographs, architectural blueprints, census records, and survivor testimonies to rebuild what New York actually looked like in the 1800s. Not the romanticized version you see in movies, but the brutal reality. What we found will change how you see this city forever. At the turn of the 19th century, New York was nothing. Less than 100,000 people crammed into the southern tip of Manhattan. No skyscrapers, no subway, no real infrastructure at all. Just cramped wooden buildings, dirt roads that turned to rivers of mud when it rained, and open land stretching north where wild animals still roamed. The streets weren't planned, they twisted and collided like scars. There was no sewage system, so waste piled up in alleys and gutters. Horses collapsed from exhaustion and were left to rot where they fell. Disease spread like wildfire, cholera, typhoid, yellow fever. The city became a graveyard every summer. But none of that stopped people from coming. Because even in the filth and chaos, New York had something no other American city could offer: a harbor. The port was everything. Ships from Europe, the Caribbean, and South America poured into New York's natural harbor daily, unloading cotton soaked in slave labor, sugar stained with blood, tobacco, rum, and human cargo. The docks were a war zone. Sailors, merchants, thieves, and desperate immigrants fought for work, for food, for survival. The air reeked of salt, sweat, and rotting fish. Warehouses stretched for miles, packed with goods that would make a few men rich and leave thousands broken. This wasn't just trade. This was the beginning of American capitalism, raw, violent, and unforgiving. New York's harbor didn't just connect the city to the world, it fed on the world, and it was hungry. If you were born poor in 19th century New York, your childhood didn't exist. By age 5, you were expected to work. By age 10, you were supporting your family. By age 20, if you were still alive, you were already old. Children worked 14-hour shifts in factories, textile mills, and coal yards. Their small hands made them perfect for dangerous machines. When they lost fingers, or worse, they were replaced within hours. No compensation, no investigation, just another body. Child labor wasn't hidden. It was the foundation of the industrial boom. The clothes people wore, the goods they bought, the buildings they lived in, all of it was built on the broken backs of children who never had a chance. And no one cared, because that's how the system worked. In 1811, city planners made a decision that would define New York forever. They created the Commissioner's Plan, a cold, mechanical grid system that carved Manhattan into identical blocks, ignoring rivers, hills, forests, and anything natural that stood in the way. People were outraged. The plan destroyed ecosystems, displaced communities, and turned the island into a blueprint for profit, not people. But that was the point. The grid wasn't designed for beauty or harmony. It was designed for control, for expansion, for money. It allowed developers to buy, sell, and build faster than ever before. It turned land into product, and it prepared New York for something no one could imagine yet: vertical domination. The grid made modern New York possible, but it came at a cost. By the mid-1800s, New York wasn't just growing, it was devouring itself. Factories erupted across the city, spewing black smoke into the sky. Railroads tore through neighborhoods. Steam engines replaced human labor, putting thousands out of work while making a few men unimaginably wealthy. The wealth gap exploded. Mansions rose on Fifth Avenue while families starved 3 blocks away. The rich isolated themselves in private clubs and gated communities. The poor fought for scraps in the streets. Fire was constant. Entire neighborhoods burned to the ground in hours. Buildings collapsed without warning. Workers died in factory explosions that were never reported. The city became a machine that consumed people and produced money. And then, slowly, the skyline began to change. By the late 1800s, steel and elevators made the impossible real. Buildings climbed higher. The Brooklyn Bridge stretched across the East River like a monument to human ambition and human suffering. Workers died building it. Entire families were displaced to make room for it. New York was no longer expanding outward, it was rising. The skyline transformed. The city stopped pretending to be human scale. It became something else entirely, a concrete organism feeding on immigration, labor, and relentless growth. The foundations were laid, the world was watching, and New York was just getting started. Through advanced AI reconstruction, we've rebuilt what history tried to bury. We've recreated the narrow, suffocating streets before pavement existed, the docks before steel cranes, the tenements where generations were born and died without ever leaving a single block. AI allows us to step into that world, not as tourists, but as witnesses. We can see the shadows, the textures, the details that photographs couldn't capture. We can trace the exact path from suffering to skyline. This technology doesn't replace history, it resurrects it. And what it shows us is undeniable. Modern cities aren't miracles, they're monuments built on forgotten graves. New York in the 1800s wasn't romantic, it was ruthless. It crushed more people than it saved. It took everything from millions and gave back scraps to a few. But those millions kept coming, kept working, kept building, because they had no other choice. Every subway tunnel you ride through, every apartment you live in, every street you walk down was built by someone who suffered for it. Immigrants who died in the dark, children who never saw adulthood, workers who were discarded the moment they slowed down. The skyscrapers stand on their bones. The wealth was built with their blood, and their names were never written down. This is the real origin story of New York, not the one in textbooks, not the one in movies, the one that actually happened. And it's still happening, because the machine never stopped. It just got taller, it just got faster, it just got better at hiding the cost. This was New York before the world knew it. And the people who built it, the world never knew them at all.
If you enjoy exploring the forgotten, the unseen, and the untold, subscribe to The Unseen Time. I was a traveler through time, and I will return with another hidden chapter of history.